At the age of 29, I just quit. And I quit without a job. Simply because I didn't see myself as being a managing partner of a big four.
You had a debt of over 2,000 crores and COVID hit.
Challenge for us was, what do we do? Whilst everybody else is mothballed, we have to show up to work. We have to be able to pay salaries at the end of the month. Where do you get the supply chains? Where do you get the medicines? Where do you get the oxygen?
The logistics.
Where do you get the personal protection equipment? Even the suits. We had nothing, and nobody did. Somebody asked me, all this is great, what you're talking about India and so on and so forth, but where is the next India going to come from?
Yeah.
And my answer was, next India is going to come from India. We acquired 2 hospitals 9 months ago. In a space of 9 or 10 months, okay, to 3x or 4x the profitability. In the first 9 months is something. It's another matter if you already hold it for a couple of years and to be able to do it thereafter. For a new hospital that we launched, typically a break even is 12 months to 18 months.
Yeah.
We broke even in 6 months. 8,000 crores of profit that we made, I think collectively in the history of whatever we've done at Max. There's been less than 200 crores of dividend. So where is the rest gone? All of it has gone to recreate or to create more capital assets, more hospitals. That's how we are moving from 3,500 beds to 8,500 beds in a space of 4 years.
Abhay, thank you so much for joining me. I have to say, what an unbelievable apartment and view.
Thank you, Devna. You've been here before.
I have, but this is, I mean, every time I come, it takes me by surprise. And you've built this all on your own, a first generation entrepreneur.
Well, the apartment's been built entirely by my wife, so I mean, I can't take credit for the apartment. But yes, I had a hand in buying the apartment, of course.
Of course you did. So, your market cap now is over 1 lakh crores. But 15 years ago, you were a professional at Anderson in restructuring. How do you feel about your success in such a short period, Abhay? Like, to say yours is a success story is an understatement.
So I feel very grateful about, I feel very grateful about the place I'm in. Things have worked out, very blessed about it. And I think it's sort of got to do with the fact that, somehow perhaps I feel I'm not deserving of it. So, therefore a little more gratitude and I dare say a little fear about not being able to replicate it into the future and so on. But I think it's gratitude which I feel.
You know, when you say not deserving all that, I mean, I've known you for a few years now. Your focus and your hard work, you've been at it for a couple of decades now. It's just that now you're reaping the benefits of it. So the work has been very, very hard and dogged by you. So I don't think you have to fear, because I think you carry this work ethic with you even after the success that you've attained, which is great. How useful was it working in Anderson in restructuring, which then led you to these next steps? How useful was that learning as a professional?
I think extremely useful. In fact, I think my entire learning was at Anderson, because prior to that I was quite an awful student actually. I wasn't good at studies, I wasn't good at extracurricular activities, I wasn't good at sports. And my learnings were entirely at Anderson, where I joined as an intern because I couldn't land myself a job. My mother knew somebody who knew somebody whose son was headed Arthur Anderson at that time. And I got a break as an intern, although I was a full-fledged MBA from a pretty useless MBA school in Belgium. But nevertheless, I got that intern. In due course, I became an all-season trainee. I was supposed to be intern for 3 months, but I lasted there for 9 months. I had nowhere to go. At some stage, I remember a friend of mine telling me the only way you'll get a job over here is by becoming indispensable. And I think that's what I worked towards becoming indispensable. But really, I think my grounding, my training ground, all of it was at Anderson. And I owe a lot to that organization because, again, work ethics, it's a place which had very strong work ethics. There was a lot of attention to detail, to everything that they did. A lot of focus on quality, on outcomes and so on. So I think that for me, those 3-4 years was really the grounding.
Abhay, you made a very, very bold move to acquire Max. Okay? At that time, you were what? At almost about 1,000 beds between BLK and Nanavati, am I right?
We were at about 600 beds.
600 beds. And then overnight, when you acquired Max, you became the largest hospital network in North India.
That's right.
Okay, and one of the largest networks pan India also, if you count the number of beds. And also in the top lot in terms of revenues. I mean, that took guts from where you were, right? What gave you those guts?
It wasn't actually as risky as perhaps you believe it may have been. I mean, we were two hospitals and we were acquiring 15 hospitals.
Yeah.
But the fact is that we were operating, or I was operating those two hospitals. So as far as the trial balance was concerned, as far as the operations were concerned, there wasn't a line or a line item or an aspect of or a process in the hospital that I didn't sort of understand or didn't own. Well, let's say understand, I wasn't familiar with. So, there was a lot of familiarity with how it's done. I had already succeeded with the two hospitals that I had under my belt at that point of time. And here was an opportunity, and really once in a lifetime opportunity, to buy 15 hospitals, which were a very dominant brand in Delhi NCR. And they were just operating at lower margins. So for me, it was about replicating what I was already doing, at a large extent or in a larger canvas, but also, ensuring that I was able to implement all the learnings that I had of the two hospitals, because, it was, again, I think the part which was sort of unsolved for was it was unknown territory. I mean, you've done it once, you've done it twice. Doesn't mean you'll do it with 15 more hospitals and pretty much at the same time.
Correct.
There are a lot of unknown unknowns, there are a lot of known unknowns, and so on. But that's what you spend sleepless nights on. That's what you spend time with your teams on. Those are aspects that sort of you go through again and again and again. And I think, we were very well prepared when we did that acquisition. In fact, we had a very clear sort of strategy that we'll be able to double the profitability. And we thought we'll do it in a shorter period of time, but we gave ourselves 2 years to do it because we built in all anxieties, all apprehensions, and so on. We did it in 10 months.
Yeah.
And
you turned it around, I think, much quicker than you expected also.
That's right.
And even though it was sort of optically expensive,
That's right.
it was a dramatic turnaround. What did you do that the promoters of the hospital originally could not do?
So I think, like my predecessor, who we bought the Max hospitals with, said, he said, actually at the time I was acquiring the hospital, he did pay me a compliment. He said, look, I can't imagine a better successor for this hospital chain because it's a very here and now business. The erstwhile promoters were in multiple businesses and he had sort of moved to South Africa. And again, it is a very here and now business. I think what I was able to do is really be a part of the team, sit with the team and execute all that should have been done. But I think most importantly, I'd already done it in a smaller format. There was already a proof of concept with the first hospital in Delhi. I sort of re-endorsed it with Nanavati in Mumbai. That was the second hospital. So it's sort of easier. The confidence levels are higher when you're doing it with the 15 hospitals. But it's very strange. I must tell you this. I had no background in healthcare. I'm not a doctor. I don't have anybody in my family who's a doctor. I wasn't a corporate with deep pockets. But somehow everything that I have done, every step that, or every direction life has sort of taken me through, be it the fact that I started doing restructurings at Arthur Andersen rather than typical M&A, simply because nobody else was doing restructurings and, that was the only job I was getting. The fact that I sort of stepped out and I dealt with unions, the fact that I sort of, by default, the journey of life took me to a lot of places and all of that. And all is pretty cliched again. Everywhere that I failed, I sort of carried it through. And that is what has worked for me as far as restructuring is concerned. So it is cliched that you learn from your failures. But in my case, it's absolutely, absolutely true.
No, it's interesting. You're saying that also at school, you weren't sort of good at anything.
I wasn't.
Whether it's academics or sports or whatever. And I feel so bad actually when you say that. But at the end of the day, you had to go in for a major restructuring for yourself
That's right.
to basically feel like you're, worth something and sort of achieving something when school hasn't really done that for you.
So I was invited for a convocation of my school, Modern Barakhamba in Delhi.
Imagine.
This is as the chief guest. This
Yeah.
is earlier last year, and they read out this introduction for me, and I was listening to them, and I was like, this doesn't even sound like me. And I had to address the audience, and I said, let me start by being candid.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time I've been invited to the school stage for anything positive. And actually, I wasn't trying to condone the achievements of everybody who has done well in school or who does well in school. I think, it takes a lot. Those are children who've pushed the envelope, have know what it takes to achieve. And it's very important. I think
And are able to work hard.
are able to work hard. I think the only problem which perhaps could lie over there is hubris. When you start believing, if you haven't had adversity early on in life, if you've been a winner from day one, you don't know. I mean, there is this hubris about it that I know, and rather than I want to learn. But my message was for everybody else really over there. I said, look, you can always level the playing field later. It's not about sort of excelling only in school. That's a part of the sort of relay race. But in the relay of life, you can sort of level the playing field at any stage. And that's something I was able to do.
No, and your aptitude and capability can come in and kick in at any point, depending on your passion and whether you find what it is that makes you tick. I think that's very important, right?
That's right.
Okay, you had just acquired Max. You had a debt of over 2,000 crores and COVID hit.
Yes.
And shit basically hit the fan, and people were not coming for elective surgeries at that point anymore. Tell me your mindset at that point.
So honestly, the mindset wasn't about the 2,000 crores of debt or whatever else. I think for us, the challenge was very, very clear. Here was, perhaps the greatest pandemic in human history.
Yeah.
We were at the forefront of it. If not us, who? It was really the first line of defense for the whole country. Whilst everybody else was mothballed at home and had to protect themselves, protect their loved ones, dear ones from infection and from the virus, we had to be on the front lines. We have 35,000 people who work for us, 12,000, 13,000 nurses, paramedics, stretcher, 6,500 doctors and so on, who had to show up at work. And not only at the cost of getting infected, but even taking the infection back home to their loved ones.
Yeah.
The challenge was, how do you get them to work? There wasn't a public transport available on the roads. Where do they go after that? Can they go back home? The colonies won't accept them back, wherever, or the buildings that they've sort of resided in won't accept them back. So you had to make provisions in hotels. But which hotels? All hotels were shut down. There was no food. What do you do about the 35% occupancy of patients that you have? There's no food, there's no medicines, there was no supply chain, and so on. Even our offices weren't working. I think the challenge for us was, what do we do? Whilst everybody else is mothballed, we have to show up to work. We have to be able to pay salaries at the end of the month. Okay, well, that's also a smaller problem. Perhaps, people will barter or whatever else it is. Nobody's going to sort of this thing. But where do you get the supply chains? Where do you get the medicines? Where do you get the oxygen?
The logistics.
Where do you get the personal protection equipment? Even the suits. We had nothing, and nobody did. It's not as if the government had a chance even before that. We just called lockdown, okay, and it was hospitals, government or private, and that was it. Everybody else was sitting at home. So I think for us, that was the challenge. I think everything else, the balance sheet and the P&L and so on and so forth, we didn't care about it that much.
I read somewhere where you said, one interview that I was looking at online, where you said, at that time, you were like, if we're going down, may as well go down fighting.
So that was a very interesting phase actually, because we had to operate the hospitals. We had this debt. We were operating at a 35% capacity. The COVID patients were yet to come to the hospitals because that kind of utilization of capacity wasn't there. and we were facing a lockdown. And if you remember, there was this whole migrant crisis which was happening. But we had to ask our people to come to work on a daily basis and at the end of the month pay their salaries. But with the debt and without any monies coming through on a daily basis, where was the money to pay salaries? I mean, there wasn't any, right? So I think we were facing down the barrel of a gun at that point of time. And there was this whole migrant crisis which was happening. And we said, look, if we're going to go down, let's just go down in flames and, at least let's get the blessings.
Yeah.
And we opened all the kitchens that we had and we served 12 lakh meals to migrants through the kitchens. And, this is whilst everybody else took a cut on their salaries, on theoretical salaries, because nobody was really getting one in any case.
Yeah.
And so people were taking cut on the salaries, but we kept the kitchens going and we were just serving because, people were coming to work. People were coming to work at our hospitals.
Yeah.
So we just got all the kitchens going and we served 12 lakh meals at that point of time. So I think those blessings worked. Somewhere this sort of kicked in. A lot of, sadly, the COVID patients did come.
Of
but,
course. And I remember that April, May time in Delhi.
That's right.
It's quite scarring when you think about it at that time. But you were inundated at that time. You were getting calls from all over, right?
Yes.
Like government officials, VIPs, VVIPs, we need rooms. What did you learn about yourself at that time?
So I think first and foremost, everybody in the leadership team in my organization, we were all playing roles that none of us were prepared for.
Yeah.
And you had to do it at a humane level, not basis anything, any of your experience, what you picked up, and so on and so forth. If it was logistics, literally it was going down to ODP restaurant, picking up tables from Sagar Ratna and using that as our office, or putting on televisions and, sort of connecting various hospitals, through cameras to be able to just communicate with, move our head office to a central location, because we couldn't cross the border to go to Gurugram in Delhi. I think what I learned was capacity of human beings and my own capacity to operate at a very, very different sort of level. Because, one of the things I did for myself was I set up, all of us, I think, set up very high standards. One of the things that I promised myself is I will call back every person or I will pick up every call that comes my way.
Yeah.
And no matter what time of day or night, and if I was in a meeting, I would call back because I knew even if I couldn't do anything, a lot of times I didn't have the beds, but just have that conversation. And, I tried to do that. And I think ultimately that is what it's about.
Yeah.
It is also something which, this learning has carried till date. We have 3.5 million patients every year who walk in through our doors. If you call our call centers and the first 3 calls, if it is not responded, the next 4 dials, the next 4 rings are to my COO's number. And if he doesn't respond in the next 4 rings, it's to my number any time of day or night.
Wow.
So, we backstop. We backstop when a patient at the point of vulnerability, when you need a hospital, we are there.
That's absolutely correct. Now that you've crossed a certain valuation, over 1 lakh crores, again, in a very short span of time, what's the goal now, Abhay? And, where are you headed? How are you going to achieve your next sort of goals that you have in mind?
So, to be very honest, the 1 lakh crore doesn't sort of, it's a great endorsement of what we do.
Of course.
Okay, but it's a number nevertheless. The fact that this is the most valuable hospital company in India, at 1 lakh crores, the highest market cap, although we are probably the 3rd or the 4th largest chain in the country, but we are the largest in terms of market cap. So it's an endorsement of the efficiencies of what we do.
Absolutely.
And so on. So for me, the target is not from 1 lakh crores, let's get to 2 lakh crores, and let's get to 3 lakh crores, and so on and so forth. I think, as a country, if we want to be a $5 trillion economy, we require quality healthcare. Quality healthcare, as per the CLSA report and some other reports that you read, you require 2.3 million beds. It's going to take us decades to be able to create that. It's going to take us decades to be able to create those quality beds. And the sad part is that every year this population, this baby boomer population, is going to get a little older, little more aware, little more sicker, and the per capita income is going to increase by a little more. I don't think we'll be able to catch this curveball if all hands aren't on deck and we aren't building hospitals across the country. I think that's the important part. I think everybody needs to join this race. As far as the infrastructure players are concerned, corporates are concerned, and all sorts of hospitals. It doesn't have to be corporate hospitals. It can be, recently Adani's stepped into it, doing it as part of the CSR. I think all of that is very, very important.
As you expand now a little more nationally, because your brand, your stronghold is Delhi, NCR. I mean, it is a very, very strong brand there. And now you're starting to sort of expand a little more pan-India, where perhaps your brand is not as well known, even like in a Bombay, it's nothing like Delhi, right? Is that a concern for you?
So let me sort of gloat here a little bit, right? I think.
Please do.
Yeah. So, we have a hospital in Bombay. We have one in Nagpur.
Yeah.
We have, of course, Lucknow you can count as North
Yeah.
India. And we have in
Dwarka,
Uttarakhand, in Dehradun as well.
Yes, yes.
And we have 22 hospitals, of which I think 14 or 15 are in North India and the rest are in, in various sort of other places.
Yeah.
Each one of our hospitals is best in class with respect to every line item in the micro market that it sort of competes in. So if you look at the Mumbai hospital, for example, with respect to every revenue line and every cost line is best in class in terms of profitability and so on and so forth. So it's not as if we've only succeeded in North India and we haven't succeeded in other places. Actually, if you look at my history or the journey itself, my first hospital was in Delhi. I mean, I had no background in hospitals, right?
Absolutely.
And yet that single hospital, without a brand, without the star doctors, had the highest sort of margins that anybody else was operating in compared to everybody else. And it's not because I could sort of dictate the highest prices. I couldn't. My prices were more competitive than my peers, yet my efficiencies were more. Therefore, my margins were the highest. My second hospital was actually in Mumbai. And I frankly wasn't a brand in Delhi or Mumbai. Right? I mean, BLK wasn't a brand in Delhi, and well, Nanavati itself was a brand, and whatever, it was sort of in the doldrums, and we turned it around. And I think so, I've lived life without the brand. I've lived life without sort of the star doctors. I was driving a Fiat, they gave me keys to a Ferrari, right? I think that's what I was able to do with Max.
Yeah.
So, I'm not really concerned about the brand. I'm concerned because I think a good value proposition. And today, the biggest endorsement of what we do is our occupancy levels are the highest in the industry. Our average occupancy is 78%. Our nearest competitor operates at an occupancy of 65%. So I think we've been able to create that value proposition and be able to repeat it across.
And a sense of reliability and sort of trust.
That's right.
I think trust is very important in healthcare, right? I
That's
mean, in
right.
anything, but healthcare, it's very, very important.
That's right.
Your senior management operations is known to be tight, very good. You manage to retain people. What is your leadership style, Abhay, and communication style?
It's very collaborative, and I think there is some sense of collective leadership. I don't think because I really believe as part of my leadership team or at Max's leadership team, each person plays a role, which is. I haven't been able to find or meet another person who could play that role as well, even within the system.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people talk to us about succession, a lot of people talked about key man risk and so on and so forth. I can promise you each one of these is key man and each one is a risk from that standpoint. I think, but that's what everybody recognizes well. Everybody's a part of a larger machinery. Everybody's an important tool in that machinery. We work well because we work well together. Any one of us, if you take us out of this context, may not be as effective. And I think that's what works. So I think leadership team is very collaborative. It's very, I think everybody's very empowered. And yes, I think that's what it is about. I think everybody has a very, very huge sense of ownership.
Which is actually very important, right?
That's
The sense of ownership when you're part of a team, of a brand, of a company.
And it's not a family company. I think, if you won't see any of my family members as a part of the leadership and so on and so forth, we don't sort of operate like that. It's a very professional setup. It's very, very high on governance. It's very high on on ownership. And when I say ownership, which is something which percolates right down the line, I mean, right across to most of the 35,000 people that we have, I believe.
You starting to get into tier 2, albeit cautiously. I think you want to see other players succeed in certain towns before you get into it, etc. There's a real future there, but there are a lot of challenges.
You know, somebody asked me I'd gone as a part of this dialogue to Riyadh, and somebody asked me over there, okay, all this is great, what you're talking about India and so on and so forth, but where is the next India going to come from?
Yeah.
And my answer was, next India is going to come from India.
Yeah.
And my reason for that exactly this is the tier 2 cities. I mean, if you look at places like Lucknow, or you look at places like Bhubaneswar, you look at places like Pune, you look at places like Kanpur, I mean, and I can go on and on. You know, the Indore, and there's so many cities in India, they're tier 2 cities, you know, where there is immense amount of development which is happening. There is huge amount of, I think, delta which is being created as far as the per capita income is concerned. Our highest ROC businesses actually are in tier 2 cities. It's not the Delhis and Bombays. It is the Mohalis, the Punjab, you know, Uttarakhand, Dehradun. It is Lucknow. It is Nagpur. I think, you know, we're just seeing immense growth. We acquired 2 hospitals, one each in Lucknow and Nagpur, and literally we have, you know, sort of been able to 4 times their profitability in less than 9 months. It just kind of shows you the kind of demand for decent brands, for good brands, for reliable brands, which already exists. I mean, it's all latent demand. We're not creating any demand.
But you know, Abhay, honestly, this whole turning around, making it profitable, this is a specialty that you have. Looking at an asset, seeing the potential, and making it work for you quite quickly and very efficiently. And you continue to do that, whether it's in tier 1 or tier 2, whether it's organic growth, whether it's inorganic growth. But I think inorganic growth is a big part of your strategy, right?
That's right. So
Yeah.
I think as far as inorganic growth is concerned, there are literally 3 ways that you can grow an
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
inorganically, right? I mean, you can acquire something, you can build on something which is already built, or you can build something new. And you know, again, it's just a fantastic team that we have, and you know, I really believe we mastered all 3. Again, I'm going to gloat a little bit because I mean, we acquired something 9 months ago. We acquired 2 hospitals 9 months ago. In a space of 9 or 10 months, okay, to 3x or 4x the profitability in the first 9 months is something. It's another matter if you already hold it for a couple of years and to be able to do it thereafter. For a new hospital that we launched, typically a break even is 12 months to 18 months.
Yeah.
We broke even in 6 months.
How do you do it?
It's really down to planning. It's really down to execution. It is, you know, you have to be in the details. That's where the devil is. That's where you win and you lose. It's all about the inches, which you have to add up and make a yard. And I think it's, you know, the teams, everybody's very, very clear.
Yeah.
Before we sort of acquire. After we acquire, you know, you kind of just execute. Before we launch. After we launch, we just execute.
And of course, you've got the planning in place, but there's a lot of it. I mean, you change the mix, the clinical mix a lot, right, in the hospital, and you sort of start focusing on the more revenue generating surgeries and areas, cardio, onco, neuro.
So, I mean, that's always the intent, right?
Yeah.
To do it across all, you know, to go higher onto the surgical specialties.
The chain,
even
the value
without-
chain.
The value chain.
Yeah.
But in some places, that's not the existing problem, right? I mean, if I take the example of Max itself,
Yeah.
you know, they were doing very well. They had all the star doctors. They were doing very well as far as occupancy is concerned, as far as surgeries are concerned, or the higher end surgeries and so on. They lost their way, as you know, with respect to indirect costs. Whereas some other hospitals, I mean, if I take the example of Mumbai, Nanavati, it was, you know, had $1 million a month of sales and $500,000 of losses every month. The reputation was, if you come in alive, you go out dead. I'm talking about 2014, 2015. You know, the doctors hadn't been paid, the vendors hadn't been paid, and so on and so forth. They didn't have, let alone HIS systems, they had hospital information systems. They didn't even have computers. So literally there was, there used to be a peon who used to go with a pink slip, blue slip, and a white slip, you know, sign over tea and hand over. So I think, we were really playing with bricks and bats over there. So it was about constructing the entire, edifice again.
Yeah.
You renovate the infrastructure, you bring in the technology, you bring in the clinical programs, but none of that can happen if you don't have all the foundation, all the building blocks in place. Why would a doctor come and practice over there?
Yeah.
If you don't have hospital information systems, if you don't have the service capabilities, if you don't have the sort of admission and discharge capabilities, patient satisfaction and so on and so forth, all of that matters, right? So the challenges were very, very different. So, it's like a patient
So you
which comes
attack
to us.
each hospital depending on whether it's an operational inefficiency, whether you need to sort of rejig the value chain in surgeries.
That's right.
It's a customized approach to each hospital, obviously.
It's what we do with patients. Each patient may come with a different sort of prognosis.
Yeah. So, Abhay, coming to the cost of healthcare today, we live in Mumbai, which is, I'm finding prohibitively expensive, and a lot of people around me. There's been a lot of backlash, even on social media, and a lot of people sort of coming online and saying, we went in thinking this would be the cost. We've come out, it's like 70% more, etc. Doctors are charging anything. Hospitals are adding on their costs. This is obviously a Mumbai problem, more than the rest of India. But sort of, is this going to be a problem? Do you think that the government is going to step into Maharashtra?
It's not a question of Maharashtra or Mumbai problem. I think across the country, I think, there are two issues over here. First and foremost is, there's some basic tenets which have to be followed, right? Tenets of transparency. If you have been given a certain estimate, okay, you must sort of fall in line and deliver at that estimate. I think first and foremost the problem is people go with a certain expectation, and what you get, the bill at the end is another bill, right? So I think that the gap there is where the bigger issue is. I think, with respect to the total cost of healthcare, I don't think anybody can argue that overall healthcare, if you look at from a global standpoint,
of course, is much cheaper.
Expensive in India. I think it's the cheapest place. It's the cheapest place in the world for healthcare.
Of course.
And by a
And there's a lot of medical tourism that happens here as a result, right?
And let me tell you to what extent. A simple bypass, the cost of a bypass in the US is $130,000. In the UK, it's $100,000. Even in a place like Singapore, it's $31,000. Thailand does it for $21,000. In India, we do it for $5,000. Not even Africa does it cheaper. We do a heart transplant, we do a liver transplant, which is the most complex sort of transplant you can do. We do it for 16 lakh rupees in India. It's going to cost you $800,000 in the US, which is in crores. So there is absolutely no sort of debate about
cost analysis,
being expensive in India. Even at Max, our average bill is 2.5 lakh rupees. That's the average bill at Max. And we are an urban-centric brand, an hospital. Having said that, I think, if you look at the whole country as a whole, okay, there are people who are struggling, okay, because, no matter where you draw the line, okay, there will be people on that margin, okay, who won't be able to afford that healthcare. I think first and foremost, the problem is there. Secondly, even amongst people who can afford it, there's the issue of transparency in some cases. And of course, I'm not saying there isn't malpractice, there isn't negligence, there is all of that kind of stuff. A country our size, with so many sort of, patients, so many hospitals, so many, things will find their way to social media. There is a lot of noise, and people do pick up on that noise. What I can tell you is that to be we require 2.3 million beds. We can't even afford to put up 50,000 more beds in the private sector, if you leverage all the balance sheets and so on and so forth. The problem is, on an overarching level, there is some sort of, I feel, perhaps a trust deficit. That in a country like India, the private hospitals which are making a profit, okay, whereas people can't sort of afford healthcare.
Yeah.
Let me just sort of take that.
Yeah.
I think out of the 8,000 crores of profit, 8,000 crores of profit that we made, I think collectively in the history of whatever we've done at Max, there's been less than 200 crores of dividend. So where is the rest gone? All of it has gone to recreate or to create more capital assets, more hospitals. That's how we are moving from 3,500 beds to 8,500 beds in a space of 4 years. All of that is going to cost. Not only have we used all our profits and redeployed all of those profits, okay, but we've also borrowed on our future. So we borrowed money. Basically, what that means, we borrowed from our future cash flows. We're investing that to create assets. And I can say this for the entire industry. By the end of it, it's not a dividend-paying industry. You're reinvesting all of that to create those capital assets. Yes, the government can step in. And yes, let's say the government says we want to cap the prices. What's going to be the cause and effect of that? The effect of that is you'll have less money going into sort of
But they'll
create
have
more
to
and
cap
more.
the fees that doctors charge. In Bombay, particularly, doctors' fees in Bombay are sort of extremely variable and unpredictable. That's fair.
I think the solution is not to cap anybody's fees. I think, if people
Keep
want
standardization.
people want to go to that particular
Yeah.
doctor. I mean, it's like capping the fee of an artist or a lawyer, right? I mean, different lawyers operate at different fee levels. If you look at the healthcare sector in India, I mean, the largest player is Apollo.
Yeah.
In the corporate healthcare, it's about 9,000
Yeah.
beds. The second largest, Manipal, with another 9,000
Yeah.
beds. Then you have us with 5,000 beds.
Yeah.
You've got Fortis, 4,500 beds, and so on. I mean, you go into the handful of hospital chains, then you go to single hospital, be it a Breach Candy or a Hinduja or whatever.
Yeah.
Add it all up, it's not even 100,000 beds for the whole country. The fact is, who is supporting the healthcare needs of the country? It's certainly not the government hospitals at the other end,
Yeah.
where nobody goes. Where is it that the middle class has been going? It's been going to all the nursing homes, the mom and pop shops, the 20-bedded, the 50-bedded, and so on and so forth. And excuse me for saying this, but the governance standards or the hygiene standards or sort of the ethical codes are not necessarily employed to the best of their capacities in these smaller sort of nursing homes. And I think you have malpractices over there. You have,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the larger ones as
Exploitation.
well.
Yeah. Exploitation of middle class is a
That's right.
very big problem at the healthcare level and many other levels, of course. Tell me about robotics and AI. Very exciting time in healthcare. Very exciting time for the world. But most of us don't understand what the real potential is. Tell me how you're implementing it so far in Max, and where do you think it's going to go?
So it's quite dramatic, actually. AI was something that was at the peripheries, and now we've sort of brought it to the core. First and foremost, what we've done is we've all the patients who ever walked in through our doors over the last 15 years, we've taken their data. What is it? What are the indications they came with? What were the markers, the contra markers, and so on? What was the prognosis? What was the diagnosis? What was they prescribed? What their journey was, and what the outcome was. And we put it in a data lake. And what we are doing is using AI tools in order to do studies or in order to actually excavate data from it. So for example, if you come into a hospital in Mumbai and you come with certain indications, contraindications, etc., then the AI tool through the data lake can look at what are other similar examples of people and what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
So whatever did work on them is what is going to be employed on you. And I think, one of the big things that we have, being a country of 1.6 billion, okay, is a lot of data. A lot of data.
And data is gold.
Data is gold. We just need to learn, and I think all of us are learning, how to channelize that data. At some stage we'll come to monetize that data, but right now I think, how to analyze that data and how to use that data. So I think we are putting the foundations in place, first and foremost, by creating this data lake of all patient data over the last 15 years, as well as whoever's coming in through our doors at present. We obviously keep it on a redacted basis, for data privacy and so on. But, so we are building all the tenets of how to use it. I think the only thing I want to be cautious about is there is also a lot of noise, a lot of froth about AI. There's so many tools and so many these things which are coming. We have to be cautious about what we adopt. We are not a technology company at the end of it. For us, the cost of adopting something is huge. And when I say cost of adopting, not only the fiscal cost, but, there are 35,000 people. There are certain processes that they're following. When you tell a nurse that, or anybody, that look, this is what you do in a day, but you start doing it differently because this is the new tool that we're using and so on and so forth. You can't go back 6 months later and say, by the way, I'm going to put you through another training program because now I have a better tool. So we are also waiting for things to sort of settle down. What are the more established tools? What is it that works better? And then sort of implement those.
But robotic surgeries are obviously starting to pick up a lot of
Oh,
steam.
really? I mean, it
Yeah.
used to be less than, we used to have less than one robot, I think little over 2 years back, and we've got 28 Da Vinci robots and so much. It's less invasive, better outcomes. You get back home faster, less collateral damage and so on. So I think, really, I think robotics is
Such an interesting time to be part of healthcare, actually.
absolutely. I mean, although robotics have been around for more than 20 years now, but really, I think all of it has come to fore now. The utilization of that, of the same technology in robotics, which has been around for 20 years, has accelerated over the last 2 years.
Tell me a bit about your upbringing, only because this kind of drive, this kind of unwavering focus and guts. You're a gutsy guy. Where does it come from? Where have you learned this?
So I'm not sure about being a gutsy guy because I think I'm quite sort of
No, you're
risk averse.
calculated, but you're also risk taking. Calculated risk, but you think really big. Like there's nothing about your life or your decisions over the last 15 years that is midway. Your decisions are big decisions. So, and also again, I'm talking about unwavering focus. I'm not just talking about 15 years. I'm talking about when I saw you, even when you were at Anderson. You could tell this is a guy who's calculating, all the time. Where's that come from?
So I think in some measure it's also, again, like I said, so much of it is default. It's where you're born. I think, I was born in a very prominent business family. And over generations, sort of, businesses got nationalized. We got to run the business. That got sort of nationalized. And my cousins, my rest of my family, etc., they were all still in sort of business. And, we came from a prominent family, but didn't have a business. So, the aspect about dreaming big perhaps comes from the fact that you're exposed to larger platforms and, a bigger worldview. Because those are the stories that you hear about your fathers or your grandfathers and so on and so forth. And, I think I always had this thing in me that I wanted to recreate. You want to recreate that glory. So that desire is there. I think it starts with desire. You kind of cement it with exposure because you're aware of a bigger, better sort of world out there. You're not willing to settle for less because, why should you? I mean, you belong to it. I think so. For me, it was always something to be claimed, something to be created. For me, it wasn't just sort of enough to be a professional. I'm not saying that it is, there's any issue with that. But the fact is, for me, that is what I was seeking. At the age of 29, when I was working with Arthur Anderson, again, I had a great time working over there. At the age of 29, I just quit. And I quit without a job. Simply because I didn't see myself as being a managing partner of a big four. So I knew I didn't want to be this.
Yeah,
So I just sort of stepped out, not really knowing why I was doing what I was doing. But, that perhaps wasn't adequate, right? So I think, that's where it kind of breeds from, my belief is. And yes, my mother has a very strong influence on me. She always said, go on, achieve, don't worry about it. If it doesn't work out, I'm here, and so on. So I think, it worked.
Now, when you've come this far and you've gained this kind of standing, even in the world, in society, amongst your peers, all of that, family, what is your relationship now with success and money? You talked earlier about there's some fear of sort of replicating this that you've achieved in the last, 15 years going forward. So what is your relationship now?
I think it begins with a lot of gratitude. And my fear is more, fear. More you have, the more fear of God you have. I think that's where it sort of emanates from. And somewhere I've always believed that, look, I'm not entirely deserving of all of this. And this is my own. This is too much. This is way beyond perhaps what I thought I would be able to achieve or would be able to do. I never thought, I kept doing what I was doing. It wasn't sort of I was aiming to shoot for a company which is going to be $1 billion or $10 billion or $15 billion or whatever else it is. So I think with it comes a huge amount of responsibility as well. I think the responsibility, first and foremost, to my family, to my children. I don't want to end up having trust fund children, so they must get the right value system. They must be grounded and so on. Challenges are different.
How are you going to do that? Look at this house.
Well, so you're right. I think that is exactly where the challenge comes from.
Yeah.
That, a friend of mine told me, he said, eventually what you have to inculcate is don't be defined by possessions, be defined by achievements. So I think at home we try to celebrate the achievements rather than possessions. The fact that you buy a house or a car or whatever else is not what is celebrated. But, if you kind of have done something in school, even if it's performing arts, participate in school play or something, those are things that you sort of reward. And I think, that again, it is synthetic, but it is something that we try to inculcate. We created a foundation. It's about how is it that we can contribute back? I think,
Especially in healthcare, right?
Healthcare, education, any which way. I think, to say the least, we feel very privileged, very, very privileged. Okay, there's a lot of gratitude. You feel very privileged, and again, like I said, I feel like this is a little more than what I deserve, so I must contribute back.
Lastly, you're now in this elite group of most dynamic CEOs and promoters in India today. There's no question about it. Who would you say, whose vision impresses you in this pool of corporate India, of overachievers and high achievers?
I think there are many.
Yeah.
There are people like Mukesh Ambani.
Of course.
Of course, there's Sunil Mittal.
Yeah.
They're both Sanjeev and Rajiv Bajaj who've done excellently well. And they're all large thinkers. And, and I find them all very unique thinkers. Nobody's trying to be, to copy a playbook. They're creating their own playbook. And I think that's what it is about. You can get inspired by other people's success, okay? But I really believe that everybody has their own journey, and everybody has their own. It's not even ambition to that extent. You will be more ambitious when you sort of find that success, and if you find that success early on, you'll be able to kind of double down on it. And if you don't find it early on, then automatically what's going to happen is that you're going to be more circumspect, right? And you're not going to bet the bank then.
Yeah.
So a lot of it depends on fate as well, right? Whether you find that success early on, whether you find that adversity very, very early on, that you can learn with and so on. So I think a lot of ducks have to get lined up from that standpoint. But yes, I get inspired by a lot of people. The Prime Minister, I think you can't have a better learner. Just look at, where he came from. Without any of the trappings, without any of the benefits, without any of the perks, without any of that support system. And how he sort of learned at every step.
Yeah.
Not only at a domestic, but at an international level. I think, I'm actually hugely inspired by him.
You're almost like an accidental healthcare entrepreneur, because you never thought that this is the sector you want to get into, and then suddenly you got in and you're sort of one of the largest contributors to this country in healthcare. If not healthcare, what else, you think?
So healthcare itself was our default, right? I think.
But today when you look at the world around you, if it wasn't healthcare that you had gotten into, what other industry excites you that you think you could have been a part of?
So like I said, honestly, my problem, I didn't get into healthcare.
Yeah.
It came to me entirely out of default. It wasn't our choice. I wrapped up my fund. I didn't have a job. I got an assignment to restructure a yet to open hospital. It could have very well have been a manufacturing company, or it could have been
auto, could have been anything.
It could have been
Steel.
a school or whatever else it is. And I got a chance to buy it. Look, I applied for a job when I finished my MBA. to work in a corrugated box company in Belgium, and I didn't get that job, and I felt really bad about it. I mean, imagine if I'd gotten that job, right? I mean, so,
Fate.
fate.
Thank you so much, Abhay. This was great.
Pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you.